Welcome to Fables and Fairy Tales. So this is essentially part 2. What I had just discussed before is essentially the introduction, or part 1, in which just discussed essentially the plot summary of the book. Now these are some of my thoughts, things that I have learned or decoded out of the book, and some of my opinions. And one of my thoughts I wanted to share in this part 2 is that I'm extremely disappointed in Frankenstein in some of the choices that he made. He is a shirker of duty. When he has a duty, he has a responsibility. He fails to complete it so many times. So he goes to college at Ingolstadt and creates this creature. He is the creator of this creature. He is responsible for this creature. This creature is not going to have any knowledge. It's going to be a new thing, a new being that he is responsible for. Just as God created Adam and then provided and taught Adam, so Adam learned things from God. This is sort of an allegory of a similar situation, although in almost like a horror book alternative. Frankenstein has responsibilities as the creator of this creature. And as soon as he sees it wake up, he runs away. He sees it and sees that it is imperfect, essentially ugly, and runs away. And in contrast, to think about God and what he sees about humankind and how imperfect we are. In comparison between us and God, we probably look ugly ourselves, and yet God has not abandoned us. But Frankenstein abandoned his creature, and he hides in his house, and then his creature seeks him out. And from what I recall, I believe the creature was trying to speak and kind of smiled at Frankenstein, yet Frankenstein ran again and ran away and ran out of the house. And this is just so shocking to me. If I had created a monster and I was horrified of it, one thing logically to do would be possibly to trap it, contain it, or destroy it. But Frankenstein just runs away and hopes that it just disappears. And then when the monster actually does disappear, he's overjoyed, and then he gets sick and recovers, but he never at any point in the book thinks, oh, that's right, I have this monster, this creature just kind of wandering in the wild. Just kind of probably going through cities and towns and stuff. Who knows, doing who knows what. Maybe it's killing people. Maybe it's eating people. What if it starts a zombie apocalypse? No, this never crosses his mind. He doesn't do anything about this. He just recovers from his sickness and then moves along with his life, goes to school with his friend Clerval, and it completely ignores that duty and allows this poor, sad, uneducated, unknowledgeable creature or monster to just try and figure things out on its own. And it's just, he shirks his duty there. Frankenstein does. And there's many other ways he does too. So first there's that. He creates this creature, but then he doesn't tell anyone. He doesn't tell anyone that there's this 8-foot mammoth of a humanoid monster walking around. He doesn't tell Clerval. He doesn't warn his family. He doesn't tell his professors. If there's anyone that possibly he could have explained things to, and perhaps explained how he did animation or reanimation on a scientific level, I believe his professors could have possibly followed his logic and believed him. Sure, he probably would have been expelled from the school and censured, or even had some sort of legal thing against him, maybe a trial, but they probably could have believed him and maybe assisted with him trying to find this creature and contain it or even kill it. Now, we can argue that's a whole other different debate, whether it is something that is evil to kill this new creature as soon as it's created and doesn't know anything and is innocent, right? So later on in the book, the monster is not innocent. It has slain people. And to me, it's logical to try and kill it. But early on, that's a completely different debate for another day. I'm not talking about that right now. So, but in his logical mind, why didn't he try and kill it? Why didn't he get help? Then let's keep going on with this logic. So then his brother dies. And then as he's traveling home to see his brother, he sees the monster close to where his brother died. And then he immediately is like, oh my gosh. Or at least he thinks, oh no, my brother was killed by my monster. It's my fault. He doesn't tell his dad. He doesn't tell his brother Ernst. He doesn't tell his future or betrothed wife, Elizabeth. When Justine is brought before court, when she's framed by the monster, he doesn't even attempt to try and explain the story. Sure, it's a long tale, it's a tall tale. It's something that would be really difficult to believe, and maybe no one would. But he could have tried. Now, maybe they would have locked him up in an insane asylum, sure, but he could have tried. He could have attempted, so that if the next thing that happened, people would believe him. If you compare this to Dracula, which I read last year, I can't remember the doctor, but the older doctor who discovered Van Helsing, when he is the one that's initially thinking about vampires, no one believes him at first, and he slowly kind of drops hints about monsters and vampires, and then eventually one day just says, I think this is a vampire, and explains it. No one believes him, but he starts bringing them evidence. He brings them to situations, and finally they believe him. Yes, it's a vampire. Frankenstein could have done similar things. It was like, let me show you. Look at the marks on William's neck. Look on, and then when Clerval dies, if he had told them before, and then when his father came, he could have pointed at the marks around Clerval's neck, or Clerval. I'm not certain if I'm saying his name right. He could have pointed at these huge marks by gigantic hands around his neck that killed him. And maybe people would have stood a chance. So he shirked his duty from one point to the next, from murder to murder to murder. And then he didn't tell his wife. I mean, he promised, I'm going to tell you afterward, I'll tell you my dark secret. But he already at this point believed he was going to die the night of his wedding. So how was he supposed to tell Elizabeth the truth and this horror story if he's going to be dead the night before? So I guess one thing to consider logically is perhaps he just told her that, but maybe he never actually planned to do it because he thought he'd be dead anyway. Or perhaps he hoped he would have killed the monster and then he could tell her the story and be like, see? Yeah, this is what I've been dealing with the last year or two, and but I took care of it. I killed it. We're good. We're good now. So he just really he has so many duties and responsibilities, and he just abandons them all left and right. And the first and worst one is he abandoned his creature when he created it. Now, my last one, after everyone is basically dead, his father dies too of, I guess, a broken heart. He swears vengeance against the monster and goes hunting the monster across the world. Well, we have forgotten someone. He's forgotten someone. Who are we forgetting? Even the author forgets this person. Ernst, the brother, the middle brother. William is the baby brother. Victor is the oldest brother. Then we have Ernst, the middle brother. The one that Elizabeth, in her letter when she wrote to Frankenstein, telling him about how he was kind of like a wandering spirit and would climb mountains and stuff, and they were worried he was going to join the military or something like that. and it was really worrying their father. And they wanted to get him some other job. She wanted him to be a farmer, and her father wants him to be a lawyer or a judge. But he's not even mentioned. After the death of his father, he just hunts the monster, and Ernst is not mentioned on any page from then on. He's abandoned too. Victor is the heir of the estate. He has a younger brother who I believe at the end of the book is probably between 20 to 22 years old, according to the, if you follow or count the years from when his age is mentioned earlier in the book. I think he's 20 to 22. He's just abandoned as well. What happens to him? Sure, he's a man, and I'm assuming if I were to make a bet, he probably followed his dream and went into the military, the Navy, or something. Like his father probably didn't want him to, but he is now the heir of the estate because, he had an older brother, Victor, but Victor goes running off into the wild, and he sees him disappear as a madman and never sees him again. And maybe he never knows unless the ship captain Walton finds him or writes him a letter and lets him know that his older brother Victor Frankenstein died on his boat in the North Seas. So it's just, I'm disappointed in Frankenstein and how he just abandoned his duty and his responsibilities every which way. And he truly is the cause of his own destruction. Sure, the monster did a lot of horrible things too, but there would not have been a monster if Frankenstein had obeyed the laws of nature. So in that sense, he brought these things down upon himself. And then no one else ever stood a chance. No one else ever knew that there was a monster until he killed them. They never knew there was a monster. William had no idea there was a monster until he encountered it in the wood and was throttled by it. Clerval, Frankenstein had so many chances to tell Clerval about the monster. He never knew until he encountered it in Ireland and it killed him. He never told Elizabeth until their wedding night, and she screamed twice. I don't know why he didn't sprint to his bedroom on the first scream, but no, he just stood there frozen doing nothing. Frankenstein, at least. And after the second scream, then he runs to his bedroom, and there she is dead on the bed. And so she didn't know there's a monster until she saw him in her bedroom, and he chokes her to death. So these deaths are on Frankenstein's head, and he is an irresponsible human being who lacks virtue.